Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Brad Franklin, I'm the Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, it's not often that you get to be around somebody at the start of something, right? So those kinds of moments, especially, for big jobs, big opportunities here in Chesterfield County, an organization like ours, so many different departments. You have directors, you have different folks at the sort of head of the spear. I'm very glad to welcome Colonel Frank Carpenter, a longtime veteran of Chesterfield County Police Department here, the new police chief here. First, Colonel Carpenter, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Thank you, Brad, for having me. Doing well.
I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you spending a few of your very precious minutes these days. As we record this, we are in between one snowstorm and another snowstorm. I know for a lot of people out there, it's been a very interesting start to 2025, let's just say. For you, obviously, a very interesting sort of moment in your career coming off of the process of being chosen as the next police chief, which I want to get into here in a minute. I always like to start with a little bit of an education and background for folks, just so I give a listener, a sense of who they're hearing from. But for here, the story kind of is exactly that background, that experience. So let's start here. What brought you to police work all those years ago, and how did you sort of work your way up through the ranks over the years?
Well, Brad, probably, in my youth, I had two uncles that actually served in the police department back in the 70s. And it was very unusual to see, men in a uniform. And I remember seeing them come in and, they would walk into the room, and it really captivated the room.
Yeah.
And so, that was a seed that was planted,
right.
in my youth. But as I started to, progress in life, I started thinking about, what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And through that process, I realized that, wanted to major in criminal justice.
Right.
And I got the bug. I had the passion to want to give back to the community, to serve. Mm-hmm. I saw, those examples of how fulfilling it was to do the job. And, I knew that, I had something to give back to the community. Right. So that's what drew me to the profession.
If you had to go back and talk to that little kid who saw, to tell him where you are now, what would that moment be like, you think, for yourself at that age?
I would say, hold on, dude, man. It's a wild ride ahead, and I know you wouldn't think it, but you're going to be a chief of police one day.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, many folks probably know by now that you're the new chief of police, but the process, I think, is fascinating here, and I'm really curious to get your sort of viewpoint on it, because you have a unique experience having gone through it. This process here in Chesterfield to select a new chief of police is as unique as anywhere in the Commonwealth. So what was it like to go through all the various steps that were involved in that? And what was your experience like as you went through it? And how do you feel, how you got to this, when you got when you heard the news and you got this official, you're offered the job, what did that feel like? Take me through all of that.
Well, Brad, it was an intense process, to say the least. Nationwide search, applications.
Yeah.
They had to search around the country. And then it was a 3-panel interview process.
Right.
And that 3-panel interview process involved video recordings of your answers and questions that were being asked. And, then there was a process where there was a community interview committee,
right.
Chiefs committee that was, selected from various aspects of the community, which
right.
was the board of supervisors, a county administrator, a board of supervisor with LE experience,
right.
and a community member.
Right.
So, it made it a very diverse panel. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really interesting because it really allowed, the candidates to really show who they were
right.
In the process. And, the community member in and of itself, I think sometimes they think they know what the police does.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That, they really got a chance to ask some questions and really understand, that leadership role and what the police do on a day-to-day basis. You asked me about, how did I feel when it was all said and done? I tell you, man, it was grueling, to say the least.
Because, most people, right? Most people go through a job search, right? Or an interview process.
Yeah.
They have an interview, maybe a second interview. And that process is like a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3, right? This was months.
Yeah.
Well, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you.
Yeah, no, it was intense, and months of preparation, and then opportunities to present, and then wondering if in fact you were going to get a phone call or a
Right.
follow up.
Right. Did they give you like time frames through this?
They
Graham?
tried their best. When it first kicked off, it was one of those situations where I was just coming back from the National Academy.
Okay.
So I was kind of trying to play catch up because I had been out of play for the last 10 weeks.
Right.
And, I kind of got a lay of the land, and then we started through the process. But when it was all said and done, I felt grateful and humble.
Yeah.
Humble.
I hear that.
And, honored to even be in the process,
Right.
because Chesterfield County has an exceptional police department.
Right.
And to be in the conversation and the talks of being a leader of such a great organization really made me grateful. So, as I went through that process, and then finally there's a final interview panel that involved the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
Some of which I knew, some of which I was, learning
Yeah.
because they were new to the board. But just, just sharing, my true intent, my heart for service, my heart for leadership, and engaging the community was,
Right.
really, informing.
Yeah.
And, I'm just grateful that it turned out the way it did.
Before I move on to the next question, I'm just curious real quick. Has it sunk in yet? Does it feel like, and I know that, it's not like you won the lottery, so to speak, right? So it's not like, but I can imagine for somebody who has, worked in police work as long as you have, you have decades of experience specifically here, to be, sort of that head of that spear, so to speak, right? Has it sunk in? What does that feel like?
No, it's such a surreal moment. I'm still kind of, in awe of the opportunity. But more importantly, I think it's so real because I got a great team.
Yeah,
and when you think about it from that perspective, the men and women that I work with
Right.
are amazing, and they make the job easy.
Right.
Because the bottom line, they know what they're doing. They
Right.
understand what the expectations are. They understand the importance of community engagement and connecting with the community and providing leadership to
Yeah.
the line level.
Right.
So it makes it easy. But to answer your question, there's times where I sit in the office and I was on the other side of the desk.
Right. Yep.
And now, I'm on the opposite side.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's such a great moment.
Yeah. You mentioned expectations. Obviously, there are many ways to answer this question I'm going to ask, but I want to give it to you and let you take it in the direction you see fit. How do you frame the work of police in this day and age? And how has that changed since you first started in your career?
Yeah, great question, Brad. I frame police work as a partnership, engagement. In the past, it wasn't always that way. It was pretty much a job that you had to do.
Right.
But I think the police officers of today recognize that we can't do the job without the community.
Right.
And understanding that engagement must start well in advance of a crisis.
Right.
That's extremely important. So to do the work, to develop the trust, the legitimacy, the transparency necessary, so when you come across on those hard times, you're able to work together to resolve issues and problems.
Yeah. What are some of your goals for the department now that you're in this new job, in this new role? Obviously, it's a department that you have so much experience with, but now, given where you are in that sort of chain of command, what are some of your goals for the department?
Well, I think, one thing that's extremely important is, continuing to increase our customer service to our community. I think when our community knows that we are committed to them, they trust and they respect the job that has to be done.
Right.
And exceptional customer service goes a long way. I think
Right.
as just community members as a whole, whenever we get that kind of service, we remember that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so reminding the men and women who serve in Chesterfield County Police Department that customer service is the key.
Right.
And when you make someone feel heard and special
Right.
in those tough times, they remember that. So customer service is one of my goals, exceptional customer service. And the next is, officer wellness. I think for so many times down through the years, that was something that was neglected.
Yeah.
And I think some of that byproduct is some of the things that we have seen happen around the country. And a lot of people don't realize that suicide rates are extremely high among public safety, specifically law enforcement. So making sure the men and women have the resources to do the job.
Right.
And I've used this phrase before, making sure their cup is full. So when they go out into the community, they can give of themselves and then come back to the agency so their cup may be refilled.
And I also understand too, because, for so many folks in public safety, be that law enforcement, be that fire, rescue, so many of them are folks who service has been such a central part of their life. So they've served overseas, they've served in the military. And so there's so much of that extra stuff that is sort of on them. And I can understand from a wellness standpoint why that's such a focal point for you guys going forward.
Very important. And, more importantly, that they go back and give the best of themselves to their families.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Because so many times the job, takes.
Yeah.
And you have to have something to be able to give back to your family.
Now, obviously, that sounds like a potential answer to my next question, which is, what are some of the challenges that you see facing the department, maybe even the county as a whole, and as 25 gets going? What's got your attention these days? What are some of the things that you see as challenges for the department?
Well, it's not just indicative to the department, but I think nationwide, recruitment and retention is an extreme challenge. But I think where we have something special here in Chesterfield County, we have a culture where people want to come and work and they stay.
Right.
And not only do they stay, they retire
right.
and then come back and work in a part-time capacity. So that says a lot about the culture that we have here in Chesterfield County. But the other things that we have to think about, the county is growing at an alarming rate, and it's mostly rural in a lot of instances.
Right.
So as we start developing the county, we need to make sure that we have the staffing available to ensure that public safety remains the priority within the community.
Right.
Again, technology. Gosh, as we talk about that, is constantly growing.
Yeah.
We're constantly trying to stay ahead of the curve, and making sure that we have top of the line and exceptional technology out there. But with that becomes a pull on the officers, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to do their job, but they have all this technology. So learning how to balance all that as they perform their duties.
And I know that one of the things that came out of the bond referendum a couple years ago was the plan to, there are a lot, some police facilities that are currently on lease. And so now there are plans to, actually put some stuff in the ground, have some stuff that is actually the counties, the police departments. And I know that change will be such a good, development for not just the department, but the county as a whole, because then the county can control its facilities even more. And I know that was a focus of the bond referendum. And I can imagine over the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, that's going to be a focal point for you guys as well.
Yeah, that's going to be special. To own your own property is going to be really good. Yeah. For many years we've been renting property. Yeah. And, it's been one of those things where we have made do with what was available, but to have your own and have it outfitted with, space that, you can have wellness centers within it. Right. That's big, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So guys and girls can, either come into work early, get off work, on time, and then work out, and then, take it on in and not have to necessarily go into a gym per se. Right. It's just going to be special. And it's going to be nice, and they deserve it.
Absolutely. And I think that it's good for not just the county from a efficiency standpoint, from a budgetary standpoint, but also, as you mentioned, good for the folks in the department. I thought I would ask you, what you kind of feel like you've gotten out of all this work these years. You mentioned earlier, how grateful and humbled you are by the opportunity. But what do you want others to know about the work your department does, and how rewarding this has been for you over the decades that you've been in it?
Well, I tell you, it's been extremely rewarding. It does, the job isn't an easy job. Right. But when you have a heart for service, it's not about yourself. You put yourself aside. Right. And you put others ahead of that. Right. And it's no more noble profession to serve for your fellow man. Right. And, when you stop and you think about it, it's not about a monetary gain. It's not about the accolades and the recognition, but it's really about a sense of joy and peace in the service of your community. In Chesterfield County, we make that a priority, that we serve our community with exceptional customer service, that every encounter that we have with the community is intentional, and that we want to have a safe community because, we live, go to school, shop, and engage just like every other community member, and we want it safe for our families as well. Right.
Real quick, a follow-up to that before I get to my last question. You mentioned how difficult recruiting retention is, right? what would you say to somebody who maybe they're listening to this podcast and they're thinking to themselves, maybe they would like to do this sort of work. Do you have a message for folks like that? What would you like them to know about what your department does and what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a person that has a heart for service, Chesterfield County is always looking for some great men and women to serve in the capacity of police officers, pre-certified officers, as well as police service aides.
Right.
And, I think, the diamond in the rough is our police service aid program. We're able to make contact with young people, 18 to 21 years of age, that may be trying to figure out life, right? And they're able to do a non-law enforcement type job, but serve their community. But more importantly, they're in a process where they're actually vetted. So should they decide to be a police officer, it's just a simple refresh and into the basic academy. But if that's not what they decide to do, the experience that they get, engaging the community and the skills they develop, going into the workforce is just amazing. Yeah. So if you're interested, join CCPD.com. We're always looking for some great men and women.
Awesome. All right, I'll let you out of here with this one. I kind of thought I might give you a chance to sort of leave me with any closing thoughts you might have, whether that's, becoming chief, whether that's about the year ahead, anything else you might have on your plate. Give me any closing thoughts for you before we wrap up.
Well, again, it's an honor and privilege, Brad, to be in this capacity. And, Chesterfield County is a great county to work for. Chesterfield County Police Department is an exceptional police department to be a part of. The one thing that I would like to share, and this is going to be like a PSA announcement, because life safety is our priorities, and pedestrian safety is extremely important. We don't necessarily have all the infrastructure in place, but people need to go the way they need to go, and sometimes that's by way of foot. I would just encourage drivers and pedestrians just to look out for one another. Right. Make sure that you're wearing clothing that's highlight, high vis, that's not dark. Yeah. Drivers, as you're moving through areas that are not well lit, be on the lookout for pedestrians. Right. Because we want to make sure that people that may not necessarily have the same means have the same access. Yeah, there you go. And not run the risk of losing their life in the process.
Well, Colonel Carpenter, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. As I know, you are a very busy person these days, in between snowstorms and all kinds of fun stuff, but very much appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us.
Never a problem, Brad. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that your shows are sold. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating and review, we greatly appreciate that. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website at Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make some suggestions, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, on the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. My thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again soon. Take good care.
From blogs to podcasts. And I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again.
Weekly video segments and newsletters.
Social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.